Honorable members, it is now 8, actually 8:05. We're not doing too badly on time. I'll call the meeting to order. We have quorum and invite the clerk to lead us in prayer.
Right Honorable Speaker, or Deputy Speaker, the leadership of majority and minority, honorable members, may I request that we pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
Amen. Good morning, honorable members, majority leader, minority leader, and committee members. So far, so good. This is our third day. We have 5 nominees to interview this morning and this afternoon. If we keep the tempo the way we have been and keep the time the way we have been, I think we'll be able to grill from now up to about 7:30 in the evening or soon thereafter, like yesterday. I'll ask the clerk if he has anything to brief the committee. If there isn't, then we bring in the first nominee.
Honorable Speaker, I request the committee to call the first nominee, the Honorable John Bandi.
Sergeant. Yes. Good morning. Switch on the mic. For the record, your name is John Bandi Ngongo. Ngongo.
Yes,
Is it Ngongo or Ngongo?
It's Ngongo.
Ngongo.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you.
And we all know you. You're still part of us. And until further notice. You are welcome to this committee, Committee on Confirmation Hearings or Vetting. I'm the Speaker of the National Assembly. For the record, on my right is the Deputy Speaker, Gladys Boss. My left is the Clerk, Samuel Njoroge. I'll invite members to introduce themselves for the record.
Naisula Lesuda, MP Samburu West.
Kimani Shongo.
Junaid Mohammed.
Koech Nelson.
Kosing David.
Gikaria David.
Abdul Rahim Dawood.
George Gitonga Murugara.
Owen Bayer.
Robert Mbui.
Stephen Mule.
Dido Raso.
Abdi Shurie. Balambala.
Mishimboko Likoni.
Rehab Mukami.
Caleb Sabuti.
Now, Honorable MBADI, welcome to this committee.
Thank you, Mr.
We know you are a serving member of parliament and you have been in parliament with all of us. I was with you in the
10th Parliament.
10th Parliament, and you have been with all your colleagues here through the parliaments. Nonetheless, they will be asking you questions, difficult ones, easy ones. Your being a colleague will not prejudice their ability to assess your suitability to hold public office to which you have been nominated. And we'll start by asking you to take an oath. You may opt to use the Bible or the Quran, depending on your faith.
I'll use the Bible.
The Bible.
Yeah.
Be upstanding, take the Bible in your right hand, and recite the oath.
I, John Badi Ngongo, do swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee on the matter under its consideration shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
You may sign the oath. Thereafter, you may hand over your documents to the sergeant to pass to the clerk, so that as we go on, he'll be verifying with what we have on you. Honorable John Bandi, we know you have been with us, and you've been nominated by His Excellency the President to occupy the high office of CS Treasury of the Republic of Kenya at a time when exceptional skills are required to help navigate the country through some difficult moments in our history. We want you to introduce yourself for the record. Give us a little preview on your educational background, your work experience, and why you feel suitable to hold the office to which you have been nominated. No more than 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and honorable members of the Appointments Committee of the National Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, as you rightly put it from the beginning, I know this committee has a constitutional mandate and responsibility to vet appointments or nominations by the President, and so being colleagues notwithstanding. However, I just want to mention very quickly, Mr. Speaker, that I'm John Badi, as I've mentioned before, and as you rightly mentioned. I was born 53 years ago in a small village called Seka in Gwasi, Suba South constituency of Homa Bay County. I went to school, first Seka Primary School, 3 years. That's class 1 to 3, class 4 to 8, in another school called Ligongo Primary School. I'll not go into the details because we don't have time to talk about my childhood history. I then proceeded to Kokoro High School. Kokoro Boys is in Awendo constituency, modern day Awendo constituency, where I did my KCSE, and then later proceeded to the University of Nairobi School of Business Studies, that is a Faculty of Commerce. I'm a graduate of accounting, and I'm also a certified public accountant. Actually, I'm a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. I am member number 6101, and I'm in good standing, Mr. Speaker, as can be attested by the file that I've just passed across. Then I must then move straight, Mr. Speaker, to my work experience, which spans over 28 years now. After graduating from the University of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, I was employed to work with the same university in the finance department. Started off at the very basic level, entry point for a graduate, which is assistant accountant, where I was basically doing the routine accounting duties. But later I rose very quickly to become an accountant, finally to senior accountant 2, and finally to senior accountant 1, in which time now I was involved in more advanced accounting work. I actually was responsible for preparation of the final accounts for the university. I was in a team that was doing that and preparing for final audit. I was also involved largely in cash flow management for the university. I then later left the university to work for an international organization called MEDEA East Africa. It's a humanitarian organization with headquarters in Switzerland. I was the regional finance director responsible for supervising the finance departments of the region, that is Uganda office, South Sudan office, Somali office, and the Kenya office. The budget for that organization, or the regional budget, which I was responsible for, was $8 million US, which in the current foreign exchange rates could be about 1 billion plus. And my duty in that organization, Mr. Speaker, was basically to do fundraising, do the budget, preparation of budget and fundraising, ensuring proper utilization and efficiency in financial management in the entire region. So I served there for 3.5 years. Then I became a member of parliament, having won my seat for the first time in the elections which were conducted on 29th of December 2007. I won Gwasi parliamentary seat, a seat I won again subsequently 3 times. Actually, I have the record of the only person who has ever been elected in that constituency more than once. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, when I joined this parliament, I have done this now takes me even to the relevance of my nomination or the docket to which I'm nominated. Since I came to parliament for 15 years, from 2008-15 January to 2022, save for a few months, like about 7-8 months when I served in the cabinet as assistant minister in the office of the president, I have always been a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. This committee is the one that actually has the constitutional responsibility and mandate to prepare the budgets of this country. Actually, the budgets that come from the National Treasury are estimates. The budget is a preserve and function of the National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya. So during which time, when I was a member of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, I interacted a lot with the Kenyan budget and the macroeconomic policies. I can attest that I've interacted with the Budget Review Outlook paper, which is always prepared every year. I am very comfortable with how to generate budget policy statements, budget estimates, finance bills, division of revenue bills, county allocation of revenue bill, generally budget process, and the debt management strategy paper. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go into much detail, but let me just mention for relevance that as Assistant Minister in the Office of the President, I was also involved in helping the Prime Minister. In the Office of the Prime Minister, sorry. I was Assistant Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. And in that office, the responsibility of that office was basically to supervise and coordinate government functions in all ministries, departments, and state agencies, which is very much in line with what my role at the Treasury, if this committee proposes my approval to the National Assembly and finally approved and appointed. In that office, Mr. Speaker, you will recall that there was no minister. And you will also recall that at the time I was appointed, Mr. Speaker and honorable members, there was not even a deputy prime minister. Because remember, the former president, who was a deputy prime minister, had stepped aside because of the cases that he had at the ICC. And the current prime cabinet secretary, who was another deputy prime minister, had already, because of political differences, practically left office. So I was basically deputy or assistant prime minister during that period that I was there. And so by default, and I helped the Prime Minister in coordinating government functions. Now, quickly, because I think my time is almost up, my work in Public Accounts Committee, first as a member in the 11th Parliament for 5 years, and later as the chairman now for 2 years, from 2022, October, I have interacted with how the government spends its revenue. So the government spend is something that now I understand very well. So if I'm given this opportunity, I can easily bring a difference in our financial management, because that is a big concern in this country at the moment. Mr. Speaker, I think I would leave it there, because if I went now to talk about my political life and chairing ODM for 10 years, and I think I would take all the time that's allocated for this vetting. So let me stop.
That will do for now. I'll invite members to ask you questions. And like I said, members, don't be prejudiced by the fact that John MBADI is your colleague. We have interviewed colleagues before, and you must be able to ask questions without fear or favor. Deputy Speaker, you'll go first.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable MBADI, I think this is within your forte. As you know, there's only two sources of revenue for government, which is borrowing or by taxing. Currently, Kenya's public debt is approximately 72% of our GDP, which has started causing concerns across the country. And also it has increased the debt servicing costs. It's affected our fiscal space for development projects. And so in the light of the rejection of the finance bill, if approved, if this appointment is approved, how do you plan to address Kenya's high public debt and ensure sustainable debt management? And in connection to that, the Kenya Revenue Authority has struggled with tax collection and has not been very efficient on doing that, and therefore we've had a tax revenue shortfall. And all the efforts to try and increase the tax base and tax the informal sector has been heavily resisted, and which leaves just those who are formally employed paying the tax. So what measures will you implement to improve tax collection and expand the tax base without overburdening the taxpayers? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for these two very important questions. I will start with the issue of public debt. Mr. Speaker, it is true that public debt levels in this country is worrying. In terms of percentage, it could be 72, but I think it's still in the region of 67, 68% of our GDP, which is very high. Public debt, if you look at it in terms of split between external debt and domestic debt, is almost 50-50. We are at about 10.5 trillion at the moment, split almost 50-50. I would go into the details of the breakdown, but I think that would be too much information for now. But I want to just mention that in terms of managing public debt, number one priority for me is debt accountability. If you listen to Kenyans at the moment and the discussions around debts, Kenyans seem to be asking, what is our actual level of debts? Is it really true that we have a debt level of 10.5 trillion? The answer could be yes, but Kenyans want proof and evidence. So debt accountability is number one priority for me. As a matter of fact, I've asked myself, if Kenyans owe people money, why can't Kenyans know the people they owe money, how much they owe them, and what is the rate, the level of interest for each loan? You will hear excuses that there are certain agreements which probably discourages disclosure. But the question is, can't you come out transparently and explain to Kenyans which are these agreements stopping us from knowing who we owe money? One of the things that I think we need to do is to make a debt register a statutory document, which should be published every year, like we publish all the other documents. Kenyans should know. It is not the government that owes money to Chinese. It is to China government or to World Bank or to IMF. We know World Bank is the single leading lender to Kenya in terms of amounts, followed by African Development Bank. Number 3 is China. Number 4 is Eurobond. These people don't, it is not the government which owes the money. It is not the treasury. It is the people of Kenya, the taxpayers, who owe these people money. You cannot owe someone money without knowing how much you owe. So I want to put it that debt accountability is important. 2, we must work on linking projects to loans. We cannot borrow loans for general budgetary support. Actually, where we lost it, Mr. Speaker and Madam Speaker and honorable members, is from 2014, we shifted our borrowing strategy from specific donor-funded projects to general support. What that means is that you do your maths, you calculate you do your estimate, and then you get your revenue, and whatever is remaining, you put to debt. So debt comes to this country, like the Eurobond, without going to specific projects. How then would you pay that loan if it does not fund value-adding projects or proper investment in public assets? So that is something that we must do. Going forward, I'm talking about now going forward, because what has happened. We'll have to deal with it, but going forward, that is what we must do. A lot has been said about revenue mobilization, and the focus has been that we should be changing tax rates, we should be increasing tax rates, we should be coming up with new taxes. I don't think that is the solution. The solution to tax mobilization or revenue mobilization should be targeting the tax collector, KRA. KRA is like a cow which we milk without feeding. We have a provision that 2% of our revenue should go towards building capacity of KRA, but we don't do it. Look at the system that KRA is using at the moment. It needs re-engineering. If you hear or you listen to those who are involved in collecting taxes, especially custom duties. Custom duties, we are losing a lot through smuggling, through counterfeit products, because we don't have a system. We don't have a system that is foolproof, a system that can help us manage some of these tax leakages. Remember, there was a time, and I'm sure many of us, almost all of us here are old enough, you'll remember, that there was a time when KRA had a very good policy of graduate recruitment into KRA, and they were properly trained, like even for 2 years. You must have properly trained tax experts. The way we are recruiting staff at KRA at the moment and deploying them needs to be relooked into. You cannot have people who are not properly trained to collect taxes from people who hire properly trained accountants to calculate their taxes. I also want to say that you need to look at the leadership and management of KRA in general. So one of my first tasks will be to make sure that I have a sitting with KRA to look at how we can reform that institution. Because there was a time in this country, not long ago, when we were collecting 18% of our GDP as taxes. Today it is 14%. If we could just increase from 14% to 18% of GDP, you will be adding about 600 billion to our revenue base. So you'll be reducing the fiscal deficit and the fiscal gaps that we have. But finally, you talked about the finance bill that has been lost. I want to tell Kenyans, please don't panic. Let us stop making Kenyans panic. Mr. Speaker, you have been here with me. In the 10th Parliament, and even some, I think up to 11th Parliament, finance bill used to be passed in September. We used to have 3 months into the financial year to pass finance bill. The minister then was allowed by law through revenue collection order to allow for some taxes, interim taxes to be collected. But the bottom line is the law could be in place in September, on September 30th. So there is no cause of alarm. We have a legal framework which is still obtaining. Yes, the Finance Act of 2023 has been declared unconstitutional, although I don't know whether I'm correct. That has been appealed. If that is correct, that is good. But still, we don't have a lacuna. In fact, finance bill is an omnibus amendment bill. We have about 5 or 6 legislations that finance bill usually amends. We have excise duty, we have excise duty, we have import duty, we have value-added tax, we have income tax, we have tax procedures acts, and then we have fees and levies. These are specific legislations. Mr. Speaker, this House, if I'm approved, this House should help me bring these legislations directly touching on these specific statutes. We don't have to have a finance bill, but I'll seek the guidance and advice from the Attorney General. But I believe the good provisions which have been lost by this bill, which are not contentious, and there are many, which can still help this country grow the economy, we can bring them as specific amendments to those acts with proper public, yes, to the Mother Act, with proper public participation. Because I think the problem we had was that the public felt there was no proper public participation, which we had, but maybe they felt they were not listened to. So we'll do the proper public participation on some of these provisions. Yeah. I wanted to stop there, Mr. Speaker,
yes.
But there was a question on KRA. I think I've combined them.
You've combined?
Yes, I've combined the two.
Chungwa, you are birds of a feather.
I hope we won't flock together.
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. First, on a light note, Honorable Speaker, you know, I have always argued with John Buddy on the floor on who qualified before the other. Now that we are birds of a feather, I can now confirm from his certificates that I actually qualified 6 months ahead of him. But, Honorable Speaker, besides being birds of a feather in the profession, let me declare interest because John Buddy was also an accountant at the university when I was a student there. And having served with him in this house for almost 12 years, and I chaired the Budget and Appropriations Committee, where he has been a member since he joined Parliament, if I'm right.
That's correct.
So, John Buddy, now CS nominee finance in the National Treasury, and you've put it very well, and you know there are many things that we agree on, especially regarding the budget-making process. And having been a member of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and also chaired the Public Accounts Committee, you have said you have had a very good oversight of the expenditure side of government. And I must agree also with you on the revenue side in terms of the finance bill being an omnibus bill and things that we can secure from the finance bill that is seen to have been lost. But you've also touched on issues touching on KRA, and there are systemic problems in KRA. And you and me know that our revenue projections, we have always not agreed with them. I would now want to hear what you intend to do now that the shoe is on the other foot, to make sure that our revenue projections are as realistic as possible. Because, you know, part of the problems that we've had with our fiscal deficit is unrealistic revenue projections coming from the National Treasury and, of course, having emanated from KRA. We've spoken about the systemic problems in KRA, including the lack of customs systems management, proper customs management systems at KRA. I would also want to hear what you intend to do. And you know there is resistance within KRA to have proper systems put in place. Because as you say, especially on the customs side, people are minting hundreds of millions for themselves at the expense of the nation. I want to hear specific what specific measures you intend to take at KRA to ensure first that there are proper systems. Because as you rightly said, that is what is lacking within KRA, besides the management problems that you have alluded to. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Can you manage 2 in a row? Junet?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to ask the nominee, Chairman, You see,
He is here as a nominee
I forgot, Chair. I
and
forgot,
not
Speaker. I forgot, Speaker.
as a chairman of any formation out there.
Honestly,
Actually, I hope, Mr. Speaker, he was not referring to me being the chairman of ODM. I've already resigned.
oh,
Yes.
you know, Mr. Speaker, you know, for when you call somebody for the last 15 years chairman, that
Yes.
becomes his name.
Yes.
Anytime I find I used to call him chairman. Now, Mr. Nominee, one thing I wanted to ask you is that you have explained it very well, but you have come to this position, you are coming to this position at a time when the economy is not in a very good situation. And as you are aware, 70 shillings of the 100 shillings collected is going to pay debt. And Kenyans don't even know whether we are paying real debt or fake debt. That's what they're grappling with. So how will you ascertain what kind of debt we have, whether it is a fake debt or real debt? Secondly, as you are aware, the poor in this Kenya feel that this economy is rigged against them. They don't feel they are part of this economy. What measures will you put in place to tell Kenyans, the poor ones, that you are part and parcel of this economy? Issues of pending bills, Chair. Issues of 30% of the budget. I mean, nominee. Nominee. Issues of 30%, how will you achieve 30% of our budget to go to the development expenditure? My last question is, nominee, you know very well, me and you never believed in this bottom-up economy. Now we have found ourselves here. You know what we believed in. You know your principle must guide you. How are you going to marry these different thoughts of bottom-up economy and what you believed in? You participated in manufacturing another economic manifesto. So tell me how you'll marry the two, Mr. Nominee, this bottom thing now that you're inside.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me start by addressing...
Leave the laughing to the public. Just listen and...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think... thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to start by responding to the questions raised by the Leader of Majority, my friend Kimani Ichung'wah. Yes, I agree. We have complained, Mr. Speaker, previously that our budget estimates, especially on revenue side, are not realistic. In fact, I'm persuaded that we have been using revenue as a balancing figure. Revenue projection as a balancing figure. It's like what we do as a country is we look at our expenditure level, where we want to spend, how much we want to spend. Then once we get that total, then we ask ourselves how much can we raise from the loan or debt market, external and domestic. Then the remaining amount we put as revenue projection. That to me is very wrong. We must reform the economic policy department of National Treasury. Reforming does not mean you lay off staff. I want to be very clear there. Just focus our economic projections so that they are realistic, they are based on evidence of economic growth. If previously you have not been able to collect so much, why do you then pretend that you can collect so much in the subsequent year? Like, Mr. Speaker, we have collected only 2.2 trillion this year from ordinary revenue. Yet we are projecting to collect, we had projected initially before the challenges we faced with the finance bill to collect 2.9. That is a whooping 700 billion increase. That was not realistic. Right now it has come back to, or come down to 2.6. So we must be realistic in our revenue projections. But even be that as it may, we must also still enhance revenue collection by reforming KRA, because we are still under collecting. But in terms of budgeting and projections, I agree with Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah that we are going forward, we are going to be more realistic so that we don't have big budget deficits and budget revisions in the course of the year as we have had it previously. In terms of how do we address the challenges of collection of taxes, custom duties, it is, and I mentioned it, the system is porous. We must make sure that we automate it and automate it properly. Sometimes we pretend to be using automation, yet we use outdated systems, systems that are just aiding the leakage of revenue instead of helping. We must carry out proper review and evaluation of KRA. I have the first meetings, I will guarantee this committee, if you approve my nomination to become the CS National Treasury, my first meetings will be focused on how to reform KRA. Because without that, we are not going to succeed in revenue mobilization. Honorable Junet, you've raised the issue of debt, and you have asked, how do we determine real from fake debt? I don't want to use it fake or real, but I talked about accountability, debt accountability, public debt accountability. And I said, I am committing that we must try to make this a statutory document so that every Kenyan knows how much we owe, to who, and at what cost. The other thing that I want to talk about in debt management is we must manage our liability. We have to restructure our debts. Let me just give me 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, to say the following. That if you look at how our debt was structured, especially external debt, in 2010, we had 60% of that debt, 66 actually, under multilateral, which are concessionary loans, and only 4% on commercial debt. We moved to a point where 31% in 2020, 31% of our debt was commercial debt. Averaging interest rate is 8 to 9%. That is not sustainable for an economy. It is now coming down, it is 23%. My focus is to have commercial debt at no more than 5% of our debt portfolio, external debt portfolio, and have 75% of our debt under multilateral debt and only 20% or thereabout on bilateral debts. With that, you can clearly reduce the cost of debt. But something else about debt is, Mr. Speaker, and sample this, honorable members, our debt portfolio is 50-50, almost, external, domestic. Yet interest payable per year on external debt is 260 billion, on domestic debt is 700 and almost 50 billion. 3 times we are over borrowing domestically. And we have raised the interest rates of borrowing domestically. I know I'm one of the people, if you look at my wealth declaration, I have a government bond I've bought of 13 million, and I'm getting almost 16% returns. That is unsustainable. We must have a conversation, Mr. Speaker, and not to scare anyone. We must have a conversation with banks. We are not going to control interest rates.
We want you to give the country hope.
Yes.
And you are doing so.
Yeah. We are not, I'm not going to advocate for interest rates control, as in setting the rates to be charged. It had very disastrous result when we attempted that, remember, through a legislation. But banks promised us, Mr. Speaker, banks promised us that if we remove the rate caps, they would loan even more to the private sector. Presently, that is not the case. In fact, bank executives sometimes can just sit and take teas and do nothing, but still make money for shareholders by buying government bonds and government bills. We must move away from that. Actually, we have crowded out private sector. You can see the youth is up in arms. They have no jobs because the private sector is not borrowing money from the
not lending.
The private sector is not borrowing money
from banks, yes,
to invest, and so we can't create jobs.
Yes.
I know that one of the reasons why we have been raising the interest rate is to control inflation. Inflation has reasonably been controlled now at 4.6%. We must also be alive to the fact that we must balance the two. There must be a net-off effect so that we also grow our economy. Thank you. Finally, there was the issue of what do we do about the poor and the pending bills. Pending bills is a serious matter, Mr. Speaker. I think it is something that we must agree on. I know we are moving as a country to accrual basis. As an accountant, I know with the accrual basis of accounting, then we will not be talking about pending bills because there will be no cutoff. Any bill that comes will automatically move to the next financial year and pay it. But these pending bills, a lot of them are also fictitious. I know there is a committee in place, and I don't want to criticize that committee. I know it is headed by the former Auditor General, Edward Ouko. But Mr. Speaker, I ask myself this question. The pending bills that I'm told have been submitted to that committee, or before that committee, is upwards of 663 billion claims. And there are a total of 114,000 plus of those claims. How do you have one auditor, even if you are a genius, with a few months to audit that and give you? So what I'm saying in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, is that we need to have a system where there is nothing like pending bills verification, because it has become a way of just failing to pay bills that are owed. We must have a system.
Not only that, nominee, you remember about 8 years ago, there was a committee to verify pending bills. It became a toll station. And all the committee was doing is go to a town like Eldoret, pitch in a hotel, and people with so-called pending bills turn up with briefcases and have their pending bills approved.
Exactly.
You remember?
Yes.
Yes.
And it
what are
happen,
you going to do differently?
It may happen again and again. What my proposal would be is that we may have to have a system, and it can even be through a legislation, where a legislation, we have in the PFM Act that pending bills form first charge. But we should criminalize failure to pay pending bills. But above all, as CS Finance, which does not even require any policy or any legislative intervention, I will make sure that we have a system in place which locks anyone who attempts to pay a new bill and ignoring an old one. The system can lock you out, so that first in, first out. If a bill is supposed to be payable, let it be paid. This idea, I remember I've been an accountant at the University of Nairobi, and during our time, Mr. Speaker, what used to happen is you'd prepare checks. You know, there was cash flow problems. You'd prepare checks and put them in a drawer, many of them, a bundle. And so people come, and there was a big black book which was called check register. So the suppliers come, and checks are issued through that register. So depending on how nice you talk to the accounts department, then your check is released. Yet the one for Honorable Speaker even goes stale after 6 months. Those are things that we can cure through a system where you have an accounting system which allows payments to be made on first come, first served basis. Thank you. Finally, Honorable Jonette asked me a question I didn't expect to come from him, but I expected to come. Mr. Speaker, I've been asked about bottom-up. Bottom-up economic transformation agenda. That is how it is called. Let me tell you, through you, Mr. Speaker, tell Honorable Jonette this, that bottom-up is actually a concept of UDA, read Kenya Kwanza. But I want to tell him that if you look at the philosophy of UDA and ODM, there is no difference. Actually, the two are social democrats.
Yes.
The two political parties promote social democracy. But let me leave that for that. Look at better. What is it all about? It talks about job creation. It talks about cost of living. It talks about agricultural productivity. It talks about digital economy. What about ODM? What was in our manifesto? We talked about the same. Actually, the better concept is on value addition. Now, ODM manifesto, which I participated in drafting, we had manufacturing emphasizing on agriculture as raw material. So it is manufacturing supported by agriculture.
Did you read Animal Farm?
I read it some time back, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
But now, better is on value addition.
Yes.
For agriculture for value addition. ODM, agriculture for manufacturing. Semantics. But again, finally, Mr. Speaker, housing was our concept, both of us. But finally, Mr. Speaker, there is the Constitution and the PFM Act, which will guide my conduct in office, if approved. Thank you.
Naisula? Yes.
If you allow me, Honorable Speaker, just a supplementary on one of the things John Buddy said around workings of the National Treasury and your work as a member of Parliament, the abuse of Article 223.
Yes.
And you know, since we were both in the Budget Committee, this has been a huge problem. And it continues to date. You've had in the recent past very senior government officers trying to twist people in the National Treasury to pay even confidential expenditure out of Article 223. I would want to hear what you intend to do to now stem from the root cause or where this problem emanates from the National Treasury, abuse of Article 223. Lastly, when you spoke about the good things that we lost in the finance bill, you may or you may not agree with me that partially the problem was out of very poor communication by the National Treasury. Kenyans out there were left to just listen to what was being said by members of Parliament during debate on the finance bill to know what were the good things in that finance bill. How differently will you now, at the helm of the National Treasury, if approved by this committee, will you communicate to Kenyans to be able to know that a finance bill, as you said, is an omnibus bill? It has very many good things for the benefit of the country, which get lost in the misinformation and disinformation campaign that was there with the last one. So my question is, how will you shift the communication from the National Treasury? And with all respect to those who were there before, there was literally no communication coming from the National Treasury. How do you intend to change that? And I agree with you on the pending bills, but also tell you that probably what you also need to do is look at the procurement. For instance, and you've been a member of Parliament all these years, CDF. There are never any pending bills in CDF because of the system through which we procure. You only procure when you have exchequer with you. So probably if you get approved, that's one of the other things you need to look at, to remodel whatever is being done in mainstream government with CDF.
Mr. Speaker, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. To the nominee, Honorable MBADI, you are on record in Parliament during debate of the last approval of the cabinet secretaries, and it's gone viral, widely known, that you referred to the cabinet secretaries then as skunks. Now you find yourself as one of the nominees. Are you a skunk or are you not? The second question is that we have advisors who, I'm reliably informed, sit at State House, who advise the President on matters economy. You will be seated at Treasury. I would like to know, between if this committee and the National Assembly approves you, you will have your opinion, they will have their opinion. How do you marry the two to make sure that you're talking the same? Because we have seen in the public some of the advisors talking like they're not in the same government, like the way how they work. So I would like to know which supersedes the other, and how will you make sure that you work together on matters economy and as you advise the President. Finally, there's been allegations that in Treasury, we have people who've been there for so long, times have changed, you're seeing we are in very extraordinary times. We need to think extraordinary to get our country to where we want to be. How do we make sure once you're there, you are not held captive? Because we have seen other CSAs with very good credentials, even you. If approved, I don't know what happens when you go there. I don't know whether it is the system, you become captives of IMF, you become captives of what is going on. What will you do differently? Because we are in very extraordinary times, Mr. Nominee. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, allow me to, in response to the questions by Leader Majority, to start with the pending bills on. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I had a lot to say, but because of limitation of time, I left out something on the issue of pricing and general procurement and supply chain management. That is an area that we must address. It is what we would call addressing corruption. Mr. Speaker, if you are to buy omena in Kisumu and buy it in Kericho, despite even the transport cost, you are almost buying it at the same price. But in the same government building, 5th floor, 10th floor, buying the same item at different prices. We cannot continue like that as a country. We must find a system of standardizing our prices. And again, there has been talk about automation, end-to-end procurement must now be implemented. We cannot procrastinate further. Kenyans are crying for value for money. Kenyans are talking about economy in the use of our resources. That must be realized by deliberately ensuring that we automate procurement, from the budgeting to procurement, to receipt of goods, to payment. It must be end-to-end. This idea of saying we will implement it in July, now it has been moved to January. The moment I become a CS, I want to make sure that that is implemented so that there is value for money. We can save. The former president talked about us losing 2 billion shillings a day. The current president has also talked about us wastage. In fact, Mr. Speaker, you'll remember there was a time we used to talk about 10%. Now it is 30% and counting. If you listen to those who are involved in procurement, we cannot continue in that trajectory, especially now that resources are becoming more and more scarce. We must make sure that the little resources that we'll collect, and that is the responsibility of CS Finance, by the way, to ensure that there is proper accountability and transparency in the use of public resources. On the issue...
Are you saying that we, apart from the IFMI system, the IFMI system is not working?
It is not end-to-end. IFMI system is, the procurement is broken. It is not end-to-end. They will tell you we have automated procurement. It's not true. So we must make sure that from budgeting all the way to payment and even use of goods, it is seamlessly integrated. We must do that. Mr. Speaker, and they have pushed that to January. They have been pushing that automation. Every time they push it, the time comes, they push it. If procurement is pushed, another date is given. So there must be a stop to that, and that stop, hopefully, will be under my leadership at the Treasury. On the issue of...
if we approve you, in how many days will you achieve this?
I want to work with the new set deadline of January so that we don't pass January again.
Okay.
Yes. The communication, I am in total agreement. In fact, the reason why we lost the finance bill was communication. And this we must change. And by the way, one thing that I would want to talk about and maybe advise the current government, now that I'm going to sit at the highest policy decision-making body, if approved, is that we must improve on our communication. All departments, communication cannot be left to one individual called communication, Honorable Mwaura, no, government spokesman. We must have every ministry and department communicating explicitly and clearly to Kenyans. And Treasury is going to lead. I have already inquired and found that we have a state-of-the-art media center at the Treasury on 14th floor, Mr. Speaker. That must be utilized properly. But again, we must understand that the current generation would not be very comfortable with the conventional, the traditional ways of communicating. We must be innovative. We must use the current system of communication. I know I'm not in Gen Z, I'm not a millennial, but we must be responsive to the way they communicate. And my ministry will adopt modern methods of communication. The final one was from Honorable Shungwe, and it was the first one. What did you ask about the Finance Bill 2024? That
Finance Bill was on what you have actually
what I've just
answered.
now, Article 2 to 3.
Article 2 to 3 abuse.
Now, Honorable Shungwa and I have complained over the years about this Article 2 to 3 being misused and abused. Remember, Mr. Speaker, Ruaraka land was bought through Article 2 to 3, which, if you look at the Constitution and PFM Act, is very clear on how we should apply or use Article 2 to 3. It was for a good intention, that before that the government may find that there is something that should be addressed urgently, but there are not enough funds. Yet now we abuse it. We spend it on anything. Fortunately, it requires approval of the CS Treasury. And so if that abuse is to continue, it is John Mbadi, if you approve my nomination, who will continue with that bad habit. But I came up with a legislation, Mr. Speaker, not to cause any aspersion on this when I was just recently. I'm still a member of parliament anyway. I wanted to have some controls and checks on application of this Article 2 to 3. It was frustrated at the committee stage of the House, Committee of Finance. Why? Because Treasury refused to accept that legislation, where I wanted, before money is spent, before Cabinet Secretary approves, he should inform Parliament, give Parliament 17 days, just because Parliament is the one that has the constitutional mandate to approve expenditure. No any other body, even Cabinet Secretary. But now, it was frustrated. I hope another member will pick it up now that I'm there, so that I don't resist it further. But I want to give guarantee in the meantime, with the current legal framework, I will not allow for abuse of this.
You become part of government, introduce us a government bill through the majority leader.
I will be very happy to take it up if he sends it as
Take it to cabinet.
Thank you, Mr. But Mr. Speaker, let me just give confidence that this article will not be abused, even with the current legal framework. Okay? To the questions by Honorable Naisula, skunk. Mr. Speaker, let me say the following. Up to now, I'm a member of the National Assembly with a mandate to oversight, with a mandate to legislate and to represent. Mr. Speaker, I have a duty, up to now, to vet and approve President's appointees. I must discharge that mandate properly. And that is what I did. I am moving to the other side of the executive. I will not have that mandate anymore. It is now the mandate of Honorable Naisula and the rest of us to determine whether John Mbadi is a skunk or not. I want to leave it there. On advisors, it is true, and by the way, you can't stop the president from having advisors, whether political, economic, or otherwise. He has that mandate, he has that authority to hire. The only thing I want to state is legally, I am the principal, or I'm going to be the principal, if approved, advisor to the president on matters finance. You advise, the person advised takes the advice or not. You cannot force the person you advise to take your advice. But I also believe that these people are professionals like me. So we would be engaging at one point and agreeing or disagreeing, but the final decision will be taken by the cabinet, which is chaired by the president. Finally, the only caution I would give is, if you are an advisor, please make sure the person you advise communicates. Don't communicate on behalf of the person you advise. So if I have advisors today, what I would do is to tell my advisors, please make sure when you advise me, I communicate the advice.
The rule of thumb, advisors are never known.
Thank you.
They are backroom operators.
Yes. Thank you. Finally, it's about, you are very polite. They call them treasury mandarins. The people who frustrate the efforts, the good efforts of the treasury. I don't want to call them treasury mandarins. Some of these gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are actually very experienced. Almost all of them, by the way, very experienced economists, accountants, finance experts, etc. It is just about leadership. I'll provide leadership at the Treasury so that we make sure that we work for the interest of this country. If there are gaps, I want to call them gaps. If there are gaps in resource capacity or human resource capacity at the Treasury, I will liaise with the relevant authorities to make sure that those gaps are filled. Thank you.
Yes, Nelson.
Maybe even
One question.
Yes, Honorable MBADI, maybe even
hijacked and asked 3. Ask one question each so that others can also ask.
maybe even consider further shuffling some of those senior Treasury officials. I'm told that the mafia and the cartel there is so strong that they decide on when to send an exchequer, to release an exchequer where. So that you find agencies, some of the agencies are 60, 70% or 90% on consumption of the exchequer, yet you have others that are still lagging at 40, 50% way towards the closure of the financial year. So they are very powerful, and I think it is just not about, leadership. It's about also trying to shuffle those senior cartels that are there in the Ministry of Finance. And please do it if this committee approves you. Mine that was a comment. And a question, is the exchequer, not exchequer release, on shareable revenue to the counties? The law says the 15th of every month, the shareable revenue should be released to the devolved units. It has never been done in the last 10 years. What will you do different to make sure that our counties receive their shareable revenue on time?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable MBADI, should you be approved? This country is in ICU. In my look, it's in ICU. Number 2, the success of all other cabinet secretaries that Parliament might approve, which now seems to be an alumni of Nairobi University. The success or failure of cabinet secretaries will be
University of Nairobi.
University of Nairobi. It's now the cabinet is alumni of Nairobi University. But the success, Honorable MBADI, should you be approved, is actually you. The success or failure of all of them will actually be you. So my question is this: what took us where we are from the public is opulence. It is the behavior of public servants and government servants vis-a-vis the performance of our economy. The talk of a performance of our economy is that it is very bad. The behavior and the look of the people who work in government is that it is very good. And I will give you an example. A minister driving a Prado, and then he has a chase car, which is a Prado. And actually 2 of them, I have seen this on the road. Since this problem, I have not seen any government or minister's car. I don't know whether they have hidden them or not. But the truth of the matter is, the behavior of the government servants and the performance of economy is not actually commensurate. So my thinking, Honorable MBADI, if you look at what you are saying, these are long-term, medium-term. I would propose, should you get this opportunity, let the minister drive a maximum car of 2,000 cc. Do what Kibaki did during Kibaki, so that the behavior of government servants and the behavior of economy actually goes together. But if you don't do that, Honorable MBADI, that the people of Kenya will see, then you will be actually a failure. Maybe mine is a comment, Honorable Speaker, but that is a very big comment. What is your opinion, Honorable MBADI? I thank you, Speaker.
Take the third, Kikaria.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. Mine, first of all, is for the public out there. There has been this clamor that the President does appoint political appointees into. I think John MBADI is answering them. They are out there. John MBADI is making a good account to answer that question to the public. My question is to the nominee is this. Currently, you're the chairman of PAC, and the auditing financial statement usually are 2 years or 3 years in delay. the Auditor General's report, which is a very important report for purposes of oversight, usually come late, maybe 2 or 3 years behind. What steps will you take to expedite the conclusion and consideration of the audit report in Parliament? Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
John, I'm reading what the public is sending to us.
Thank you.
We'll put to you later. Go on now. Answer Nelson.
Yeah, I will start from Honorable Nelson, the Chair, Defence and Foreign Relations. On the issue of transfers or shuffling at the Treasury, what I would say is I'm going to look at the Treasury in its totality and see if there are gaps and if there are areas where we can change people, move one person from one place to the other. But to me, the most important thing to do is to have a system that functions. Because if you don't have a system that functions, whoever you bring may just mess you up. So we need a system that is functioning, a system that even if I'm away, would still ensure that what should be done is done. The issue of favoritism, where some MDAs get funded and others are not, that to me is a failure of the system. We must correct that and ensure that there is equity, that there is fairness, that the system serves all Kenyans equally. So it is about system. Once you put the system in place, the officers you will put will do what is required. On the issue of shareable revenue going to counties, you are addressing, Honorable Nelson, you are addressing a converted person. I am a supporter of devolution, and I know that we need to support our counties. Counties are struggling at times, and a lot of times. In fact, we are incurring a lot as a country by failing to send monies to counties within the required time. Why? Because counties end up borrowing money from commercial banks and pay huge interests on borrowed funds just to pay salaries. We must make sure that we reverse that. I know there are revenue constraints, but we must balance. We must manage our cash flow. That will be my responsibility. One of the most important and critical departments at the Treasury is that Department of Accounting, the department that deals with managing the cash flow. Honorable Kosing, I hear you. A lot of opulence, a lot of wastage. By the way, even the reconstitution of this cabinet is as a result of, is actually a direct consequence of show of opulence, which made some Kenyans mad, to the extent that now the president had to be forced to do certain things which he shouldn't have done, really. So we must contain wastage. We must contain wastage, but we shouldn't be mechanical about it. In my view, we should contain it practically. One of them is to reduce our operating expenditure. We must make our budget transparent. This idea of lumping budget lines and saying other operating expenses must go from our budget. What are these other operating expenses? We must be clear. If we are paying for mileage, Mr. Speaker, for example, let it be known. We know that members of parliament have to be facilitated to go to the consumer. I'm not saying that is parliament that is putting, actually parliaments rarely put block figures.
It's good to use us as an example.
Yeah, but I'm giving parliament as an example. But there are ministries, departments, which do that. Mr. Speaker, have you asked yourself why we still have one officer, a driver, taking impress for 200 staff for a training? Yet every member of staff has an IFMIS number. Let each person get a per diem allowance or impressed and comes back and accounts for it, like it happens in parliament. Anytime I move out of the country, I am given my impressed. I come back and account for it directly. It's never given to clerks. But you go to ministries, there is lump sum amounts, impress, you find someone taking 3 million. These are wastages that we must work on and control. Finally, on that, Mr. Speaker, and as I said, we must work on procurement. That, to me, is the elephant in the room. On Honorable Gikaria, I know Kenyans have not had kind words for political appointees, but I also want to tell Kenyans out there that being in a political office is just a calling. Actually, it is them who elect us to those offices. It doesn't take away our training, background, and professional experience. I have said I've worked for 28 years. I am a professional, just like any other professional, whether in politics or in private practice or in otherwise. Remember, Mr. Speaker, I didn't say this. This Public Finance Management Act, my signature is here. I was in the task force which did this Public Finance Management Act. We were with the former CS Rotich. We were with Kamau Thuge, who is now the governor of Central Bank. We were with Professor Malombe, or I don't know whether it's Dr. Professor Malombe, who is now the governor Kitui, and myself, paid by World Bank to prepare this Public Finance Management Act, which is used by everybody. I'm a professional, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2011, you remember, and we were with you in the National Assembly, consulting with Mass Group. I was their consultant. We came up with the 10 million error in the budget. I'm the one who brought it to the House, which became known as computer error. As a professional, I made sure that Kenya, and by the way, Treasury agreed that that was an error. Remember, there were professionals at the Treasury, yes. But the professional who is a politician is the one who discovered that there was computer error. So I want to just give confidence to the public that even when you're a politician, you can be a professional. Finally, on chairing PAC and financial statements that are in arrears, the confidence is this, Honorable Gikaria, that beginning with Honorable Wandai, who is my predecessor, to my committee, we have really tried to be up to date. In fact, I am leaving that chair when we have just concluded examining accounts for 2021-2022. We were planning to have the report in the House in July. Unfortunately, because of the events that we are all aware of, that report, I'm sure, will be tabled in August. Then we'll only be remaining with 2022-2023, because 2023-2024 has not been audited. It will come next year, like February. The committee that I'm leaving in place, I am sure before the end of this fiscal year, will be done with 2022-2023 and table their report. So we'll be up to date. There should be no worry at all. The National Assembly has done a lot of justice to our audited accounts. But, Mr. Speaker, you'll allow me to mention that we need to give more resources to our Auditor General to do special audits, do forensic audit, because this financial audit that we are paying too much attention to is not going to help us really improve financial management. In my office, if you approve me, I will persuade the cabinet to give more resources. We can afford to give more resources to Auditor General to save much more, because we are losing so much. Special audits, and I've left quite a number, which I asked the Auditor General to do. If you look at those special audits on the study, 3 of them I'll mention. One is on Article 223, Mr. Speaker. It is there in Parliament, and the committee will deal with it. There's another one on fertilizer. All these issues that we are talking about are in that report. Number 3 is on Stadia. Serious mismanagement of resources or in construction of our study across the country. If you look at that report, you would be very happy with the work of the Auditor General, as opposed to financial report. So we should really give more resources to the Auditor General to do special audits so that Kenya can save money, which is being wasted through corruption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mary Emasi, the Honorable.
Thank you, Chairman. Nominee, my questions to you start from a statement you've just made to Kenyans, confirming that in the collapsed finance bill 2024-25, that indeed there were good clauses or good intentions for Kenyans. And that is why some of us who voted yes believed in incorporating the views of Kenyans through public participation, removing the bad and approving the good therein. Having said that, one of the reasons why we've been judged harshly by Kenyans, and again you've alluded to that, is the miscommunication. How we communicated the contents in the finance bill to Kenyans, which was surrounded by a lot of propaganda. Now, my question to you, how best do you think that we should communicate to Kenyans? How best should we do public participation going forward? Because you are the one who is going to bring to us the next finance bill. Secondly, you've also spoken to the aspect of revenue raising, and you've said you're going to look at, have a dialogue with KRA and see how best to improve KRA. Do you believe by just restructuring or reorganizing KRA, we will be able to raise sufficient revenue to finance our budget? If not, what other revenue-raising measures do you intend to bring on board, because you're the one who will be bringing to us the finance bill? Last but not least, we have interns in KRA. Some of them have been serving for the last 3 years and just getting stipends. They have not been confirmed. Yet I'm also aware that KRA is understaffed. For them to realize the objective, they need to be staffed properly. What are your thoughts? What are you going to do about it? And finally, the last one.
One at a time.
The last one, Honorable
You've
Speaker.
hit 2 already.
Just the last one. Again, a nominee in the supplementary estimates 1 for 24-25. We have rationalized expenditure for all sectors in pursuit of fiscal consolidation. And this is adversely affecting some of the social safety nets that are likely to affect the most vulnerable members of the society. How do you intend to turn around the economy so that you cushion Kenyans to prevent negative impact on their welfare? Thank you.
Members, at least be conscious of your colleagues also queuing to ask questions.
Chair, my apologies. You know, we've worked with the nominee in the budget and appropriations, and we're also in the same line. So I had a number of questions. Thank you.
Divorce and due familiarity with the nominee, and interview them in the manner we have been interviewing others. Dawood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The nominee, Honorable Badi, the division of revenue for the county governments was reduced because of the failure of the 2024-2025 finance bill falling. And now, subsequently, the finance bill 2023 has been declared unconstitutional. Do you, in your opinion, think that again you will ask for the division of revenue from 380 billion going to the counties going down again? Secondly, is the tax policy, being an accountant of long standing, you know, there has to be, tax has to be simple and not be changing each and every other day. You have to give businesses time to recover, because I mean, if you change tax policy every other year, how do people plan on what they are going to do? Because that is the other issue. You talked about pending bills as well. You said they should not be paid, or you will have a system. What kind of system are you talking about? You're saying they will not be paid, or you will pay them, but in what manner will you pay them? Thank you.
Murugara as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nominee, the Honorable John Bandi. To the eyes of Kenyans, you are actually the treasurer of the country. You are the one who is going to be responsible for everything that we treasure, especially our money. The first limit is, would you be able to take a stand and keep that stand firm? Will your yes be a yes and your no be a no? And if so, Kenyans know very well that the reason why we are where we are grossly is because of pilferage of public resources. And everybody knows what the Auditor General, whom you propose to be funded, has been reporting year in, year out. But not one, not two have been taken to court or any form of action taken where it is glaring that public resources are actually being wasted. If this committee affirms you to be the CS Treasury, can you tell Kenyans whether you would actually stand with them to have all thieves, corrupt people, everybody who has pilfered, being brought to book to take responsibility for that crime?
Can I answer those, Honorable MBADI?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to address the questions raised by Honorable Massey. Honorable Massey, I can't overemphasize the value of communication, and I would repeat again that one of the weaknesses of the Finance Bill 2024 is that it was not explained properly. And remember, there was this tax on motor vehicle. No one could explain why it was necessary. The people, some of the people or speakers the government sent or Treasury sent to explain it even made a mess of the explanation by saying that this is to increase or enlarge the tax base. Yet almost every one of us who owns vehicles, we pay taxes in one way or the other. So communication is key. Public participation, I think National Assembly, Senate, we need to come up with a clear legislation on public participation. Given the recent events at the courts, we must. This is a priority, and I am looking straight at the majority leader and the minority leader. Then the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, kindly help the government get a legislation in place if the government has not prepared one already.
EGH is working on one.
The EGH is working on one, I hear. That is very good. So, yes, I don't want to say that there was propaganda or otherwise. You know, if the animal had become bad, Mr. Speaker, in the eyes of Kenyans, the Public Finance Management Bill 2024. So reasoning was thrown off the window, and everybody believed it should be defeated. So I think that is what, but that is because of the communication. On the issue of, so you see, at the beginning, for us to communicate effectively on any matter that comes from government, first there should be believability. I think trust level has gone down. We must build it. We must rebuild trust level. The government must rebuild that trust level. On revenue collection, there are many other measures, but the most important is we must clearly have a state-of-the-art system to collect our taxes. Other revenue-raising measures, I want to mention that we must now think through methods that would generate revenue off balance sheet. One of them is climate change financing. Climate change has a lot of money out there, 1.3 trillion US dollars. We must tap into that money to reduce pressure on the budget. My colleague and friend Honorable Duale's budget should heavily be funded from the climate change financing. Kenya has already applied and has succeeded in securing 259 million